Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Strong, and you are watching fourth part of What If Naruto Became Strongest Man of Elemental Nation. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Oh, I see. So your clan has been like this for a long time, has been corrupted beyond repair, and thinks it is stronger than Kami herself. Not only that, but they have marked you as their slave and will use you as a breeding stock because you are the strongest female in the whole clan. Naruto said, summing up everything he had been told. Only an hour had passed since Konoha was destroyed, and the four of them were already on their way to the Uchiha clan compound. He knew everything the Uchiha were planning, but most of it didn't bother him. However, the part where Makoto was marked as a slave and was to be used as breeding stock really got on his nerves. He didn't know Makoto very well, and he was very suspicious of her. But if there was one thing he hated more than anything else, it was when men used women as things and fuck toys. He had seen enough of that while on clan missions and on his own travels.
Bandit camps, poor villages, and brothels open to the public.
All of these things made him sick to see how the women used them. On the same day, he got rid of those places and freed all the women who were being mistreated. He also killed the men who did that to them. Yeah, and what's worse is that the elders of the clan who still follow the old rules have been planning to put a seal on me since I'm the only one who has fought against these rights. The seal would turn me into a mindless worker who would do whatever they said without question. Just thinking about them putting that on me makes me angry. Makoto spoke before she began to shake because she was both disgusted and scared. When Kushina saw this, she hugged her friend, and the teen cried into her shoulder. Kushina patted her back gently and looked at Naruto with a pleading look in her eyes. That was something he couldn't fight, even though he had wiped villages off the map, destroyed armies, fought and beaten Biju. But the one thing he couldn't beat was Kushina's pleading violet eyes. Akemi saw her former container looking pleadingly at Naruto, and she could tell how much Naruto was losing when she looked at him. It was pretty funny to see someone with so much power and control lose with just a look. He sighed and said, "Okay, I'll deal with the clan, but after that, we have to leave." He didn't like helping a former Konoha nin, but if Kushina trusted her enough, he'd do it. Plus, he's been itching to kick those Uchiha's asses for a while. He didn't see Kushina's victory sign to Akemi or Makoto, but he did hear the three of them laughing a little. He turned around and raised an eyebrow, but all of them were just blinking at him. He turned around and shook his head, so he didn't see Kushina's big grin, Akemi's sly grin, or Makoto's small smile. As they ran through the woods on their way to the Uchiha compound, Akemi caught a glimpse of Naruto's giant form and became curious. "Anyo, Naruto-kun?" He just looked at her and asked. "Yes, Akemi?" The Biju just ran up next to him and started talking. "I don't understand something. It's been 10 years, and I remember you being tall even when you were your age, but I don't know how you got to be this tall. Or the question of how you can still move at such high speeds." This also caught the attention of Kushina and Makoto, who hadn't thought about it before Akemi brought it up. Naruto groaned, "To be honest, I don't know, but I think it comes from my father's side of the family. Everything I am now makes me think it came from my father's side, and I think he was either a giant or a half-giant. All I know is that this is my full height and has been for the last 2 or 3 years. I hid in a henge so that nearby villages like Iya and Konoha wouldn't find out where I was." Akemi nodded when she said this, and then she said, "I see," she said, still wondering why a person was so tall. She had seen giants before, some as short as 50 feet and some as tall as 500 feet. Kushina blinked and then looked at him with a curious look when he said, "I'm just glad I have a way to change this form into a more normal one." "Shift? What do you mean?" Before he looked at Kushina, he stopped. He reached out with his senses but didn't feel anyone nearby, so he spoke. "Well, I have 2 forms. One is the one you see in front of you, which I only use in battle. When I'm in public, I use my normal form. I can switch between these forms whenever I want to, but it's so annoying. All she did was nod. Let's go, they said, and then they sped toward the Uchiha clan, knowing that tonight would be a night to remember. For a long time to come. Main gate to the Uchiha compound. Coming to the gate while killing the guards, or in Naruto's case, snapping their necks. When the group got to the Uchiha top gates, Makoto was standing in the middle of Kushina and Akemi. Her eyes were so close to staring at the gates that it was clear she hated and despised them. Naruto took a step forward and put his hand on the gate. Now, I'm just going to say it, I won't have the slightest bit of mercy. No one will make it through this night, whether they are a woman, a man, or a child. This is a warning to you, Uchiha Makoto, tonight will be the last time you ever see the clan again. Makoto shut her eyes and sighed before opening them again. I know, and I don't care. This clan, this practical hell, needs to be destroyed, wiped off the face of the earth, tonight. Everyone in the clan needs to die. When Naruto looked into her eyes and saw no sign of doubt, he gave her a nod. Alright, then. Bear witness to. He says as he swings his fist at the gate. It squeaked when he tried to move it with his huge, titan-like strength, and then it shot off like a rocket, smashing houses and walls full of logs. With his fist raised and his eyes staring out from behind his bangs. This pathetic excuse of a clan must end. His voice was so cold and evil sounding that Kushina, Makoto, and even Akemi felt a chill go down their spines. The attack got the clan's attention when people started running out of their homes and saw Naruto's huge body standing at the gate with one of their own Uchiha standing next to him. Soon, their confused looks turned into angry ones. Who are you, visitor? And why did you come? Yelled one Uchiha. Naruto didn't pay attention to the man as he took a step forward, shaking the area with each step. Many people were a little scared by the way the man's eyes looked and how big he was. As he walked up to the first Uchiha he could see, he raised his hand and spoke in a way that made every Uchiha in the area shiver. What I'm doing here doesn't matter to you, you idiot. What matters is that I'm cleaning the world of your filth. Die. Trash, and he did it with a swipe of his hand. The huge boulder-sized hands hit the Uchiha so hard that he was thrown back and went through 4 houses in the wall itself. Then, without warning, he ran at another group. When they couldn't defend themselves in time, he brought his other hand down, and the blue sphere swallowed it up. When the Uchiha hit the ground, it had no time to even scream. The only sign that something was about to happen was a shift in the ground. Then, from behind them, a huge piece of earth rose up and completely blocked their view. Before it fell, when they looked up, their eyes got bigger. Squelch. The area was filled with the sound of bodies being crushed. The now dead Uchiha couldn't make a sound because of the huge amount of pressure on them. Their flesh was pounded into the deep dirt, their bones were shattered and crushed into dust, and their blood exploded out of their bodies like a balloon, mixing with the blood from the ground and turning it a reddish-brown color. He didn't care about this, so he walked right on the slab and got another wet fleshy. Squelch Akemi laughed at this as more blood seeped out of the ground and onto Naruto's boot. But he didn't show any doubt or disgust about what he did. Even Kushina was used to his harsh ways, even if they were a bit more cruel than they used to be. She knew this from when she was younger. Makoto, on the other hand, didn't have such luxuries. She stood still for a few seconds as she tried to figure out what she had just seen. Yes, she had killed before and earned the right to be a shinobi, but what she just saw made everything she had seen in the war look, if normal is the right word. She shook herself out of her daze and kept going. She knew things like this would happen, and she didn't have time to slow down and be afraid. She had the chance to start a new life. Even if she had to give up her blood and clan to do it, she would. Also, they deserved it, because the curse of the clan would have followed them for years to come. It would be easier to just get rid of it before it could do any more damage. Soon, she went after them, not knowing that Naruto had been watching her the whole time. This wasn't just a purge for the clan. It was also a test. It was a kind of loyalty test, and he had to do it to find out if Makoto was really serious about coming with them. Even though he lied, he needs to know that what she said was true. Even though she was hesitant, her actions showed that she was determined to move forward, not on the path of a traitor but on the paved road to a new life full of mysterious adventures with many twists and turns filled with blood and death.
Hey, Makoto, you've earned some of my trust, but not all of it.
You've done well, though. As he moved forward, he gave a very cold smirk that made Akemi shiver and would have made Lucifer jerk. This night would be one to remember. Too bad the only other people who could see it would be dead, and the gods would only be able to watch it happen. Slaughter. Let the purge begin. He shouted, and his voice sounded like a sonic boom throughout the whole clan compound. After that, the killing began. After 3 hours, the clan home compound. It had only been 3 hours since they got there, but in that short time, the 3 girls saw why Naruto was famous for what he did in the war. In just 3 hours, Naruto killed every Uchiha he came across without any help from them. Buildings collapsed under his feet, and women and children died quickly because the pressure of his huge killing intent caused their hearts to burst. All of the men were just killed. His huge feet and fists tore off limbs and broke bones into dust. His big Zanbato was unharmed by any of it. They moved through the compound like a raging tornado, with Naruto at the center of it all. He swept up everything in his path like it was nothing more than a speck of dust. Since the man could pick up a building with just one hand without showing any sign of stress and throw it at a group of Uchiha before setting off a time-delaying explosive tag, it's clear that he's not stressed. But in front of them was the head's home, where the leader of the clan and its heir lived. They weren't alone, though. No, they weren't by themselves. There was a whole army of Uchiha in front of them, and they all gathered at the home of the clan leader, hoping that together with their powerful clan head, they can beat this human-looking monster? They were all that was left of the once famous Uchiha clan, which had shrunk to just a few people from what used to be a small village. Many people were hurt during Naruto's small war with the clan, and some were hurt worse than others. But they all had one thing in common. They were all filled with great fear as they looked up at Naruto's giant form looming over them. Behind him, a ghost of a being could be seen with glowing yellow eyes that showed many things, but bloodlust was the one thing that stood out the most. Demon. He's monster. A devil. Muttered an Uchiha who was scared to death. His whole body was shaking like a leaf. Naruto seemed to hear the man, and he gave him a piercing look that made the man start laughing uncontrollably. It felt like his mind and soul were being hit over and over with sledgehammers.
Soon, his eyes rolled back into his head, and foam came out of his mouth.
When he fell back, he landed at the feet of another Uchiha, who was shaking because of what had just happened to his clansmen. Taking a step forward and making sure the 3 people behind him were safe, he said, "Now stop wasting my time. Bring out your pathetic excuse of a coward clan head, or so help Kami-sama herself I will beat and tear it out of each and every one of you." His voice boomed like a silent shockwave. His voice sent out a small but silent shockwave that made the buildings around him groan. The voice of an old but wise man said, "There's no need, boy." When he looked up at the doors, he saw a man dressed and standing like a warrior. He was dressed like any other shinobi, but he was holding a katana in his hand. The man's skin was tan, and his eyes were pure black. They were full of hate, but they also had the firmness of a leader. His hair was black and spiky, and most of it went past his neck. Behind this man, with 2 bangs framing his face and a X-shaped scar on his chin, was Uchiha Fugaku. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man. He knew this man, even though he didn't know his real name. He knew his alias from the bingo book, and he couldn't believe it, but he couldn't help but smile. "Well, I'll be damned, clan's head, I never thought you of all people would be this bad. We haven't seen each other in a while, and we haven't fought in a while either, right? Ano Mikado. En no Abat, Flame Emperor, Avatar of Fire. The man's eyes got even smaller as people gasped in shock at the name. Kushina and Akemi both blinked in a confused way, but Makoto was completely shocked. It's been a long time since anyone called me that name. I'm sorry, but I gave up that title a long time ago. My time as that person is over, and now I'm just a man who leads his clan. I can't say it's a pleasure to see you again, though. Naruto's smirk just got bigger. Ah, yes, the last time we fought was at the end of World War II. That's also where you got that scar, right? The man twitched and lightly touched the X scar on his chin before he sighed. When he looked back at the person he hated the most, he said, I no longer use that name. My real name is Ozai, Uchiha Ozai, and I am the clan head of the Uchiha clan. You, sir, attacked it for unknown reasons, and I will do my job as leader of this clan and get rid of you, just like I failed to do years ago. Naruto just shut his eyes and shook his head before putting his hands together in a fist. The wind picked up all of a sudden and became very strong. It swirled around Naruto and Ozai, leaving just enough space for them to fight. He looked over his shoulder at the three women behind him and said, Kushi-chan, Akemi, Makoto, while I take this man, you go take care of the last few people. They shouldn't even be a problem. They nodded and started to leave, but Naruto yelled. Makoto. The woman yelled. When she turned around and looked back, she saw that Naruto's eyes were golden and slit. This is your chance to prove yourself. Do not hesitate. Kill anyone who gets in your way. Show me you are willing to do anything to leave this life you bear, and you will get the freedom you want. If not, you will die, along with your clansmen, no matter what Kushi-chan says. I will kill you. Understood? She just stood there for a minute before nodding with a determined look in her eyes. When he saw this, he sent her away and then turned his attention back to Ozai. When he saw his angry face, he laughed and grabbed Chaos Eater. Ozai grabbed the handle of his katana and kept a wary eye on the man in front of him when he saw this. He wanted to know why Makoto was betraying the clan and why she did it, but he had to focus on this fight right now or else. This time, he is going to die. Now, Ozai, come. It's time to end this fight. I know you're stronger than that old, weak fool Hiruzen, so I want to enjoy this fight a bit. Now come. His baritone voice cracked the ground itself. Ozai sighed and slowly pulled out his katana, which made his body look red. He closed his eyes and moved his chakra through his body, directing it and changing it so that it went in the right direction. All to fight for this. Ozai's body burst into flames as soon as he opened his eyes. The flames were neither orange nor yellow. But it was pure red, like the flames of hell. He tightened his grip on his katana and willed that the flames would also cover the blade. After that, he looked back up at Naruto and saw that he now had a stone face. He, the giant, pulled out Chaos Eater, which was much bigger and longer than his katana. But that doesn't matter. What matters is being able to use a sword well. You don't have that. You're just a child with a stick. He knew, though, that the man in front of him was a master with a blade. Good, you're ready. Now, let's begin.
Was his shout to start their last and final duel.
With a jump, they vanished and reappeared inches apart, swinging their swords with great force. Boom. As their blades met, fire and dust erupted in a huge, swirling ball. Flames flickered all over the ground, and the ground itself shook and cracked from their powerful collision. When their blades hit each other, there was a big shockwave that broke all the buildings within a mile of them. As the first clash happened, the sky turned black and the swirling vortex around them seemed to rise and got longer and wider. It was like the beginning of a fight between two titans. With his blade in his right hand, Ozai switched it to his left hand and did a few hand signs. They were all a blur, but Naruto was used to the speed. Hold this. Kaden. Dai Enden, fire release, big flame bullet, a meteor of fire shot from his mouth in a stream at Naruto. When he saw this, he moved his blade, swung it up, and kicked the other man's blade away. He gathered chakra into Chaos Eater while spinning in the air, then swung it diagonally at the fireball and yelled, Sauryukato, Soul Cut. A purple and yellow arc of energy shot off Chaos Eater and hit the fireball, before it went through the blazing ball and toward the shocked Ozai. The ball itself slowly moved away from each other until it exploded into sparks and flames. Ozai quickly rolled out of the way and watched with a mix of amazement and fear as the attack almost sliced through the ground like a hot knife through butter and cut through several buildings and clansmen that were in its way. By Kami, that was quite an attack. Don't get distracted. A voice yelled over him. When he looked up, he saw Naruto bring his sword from his left side down on his fist. He instinctively rolled out of the way of the punch, which slammed into the ground and shook the area, then did a handstand and jumped up to avoid the swing. Ozai smiled as he put his foot on Naruto's right hand, which was holding Chaos Eater. He then did a pinwheel kick, kicking Naruto in the face several times before flipping into the air. As he saw Naruto get a little confused by the sudden attack, he spun his blade in his hands and sent his chakra through it to make it burst into flame. Then he grabbed the handle and slashed horizontally at Naruto. Barizasuko, Blaze Scar, he said, and 3 flaming arcs shot out of his blade in a giant sweeping motion toward Naruto. He didn't notice until the last second, so he spun Chao Cedar in his hand to make it move faster, turning it into a shield in a way. It did its job by stopping the fire, but then Naruto felt something and looked up. When he did, he saw Ozai in the air bringing down his sword that was on fire. When he said, Barayazubaryu, Blaze Barrage, he quickly began to swing his weapon in the air multiple times, sending a huge number of fire arcs at Naruto. With a small curse, he put energy into his fist, which was then surrounded by a blue sphere. Ozai narrowed his eyes at this. He threw a punch by swinging his fist up, which made blue cracks in the air. Soon, these many arcs began to spread out quickly, just before they hit him inches away from his body. It was as if they were running into an invisible steel wall. When it was over, Naruto reacted by slamming his sword into the ground and quickly making hand signs that Ozai couldn't keep up with. Eat this. Raiden. Gion, lightning release, false darkness, he said as he opened his mouth and a spear of lightning shot out at speeds Ozai couldn't understand. When he realized he was still in the air, he did the only thing he could. He spun and added Kaden chakra to his body, turning it into a sphere of fire. As he shrank, he spread his katana outwards. The Raiden jutsu reacted like any other lightning rod would and shot at the katana before it started to move up Ozai's arm. When Naruto saw this, he knew that it was a lot of Ozai's talents. Inside the sphere, Ozai gritted his teeth before using his ability to control lightning. He sent the lightning from his sword through his body and out his other arm, making a beam. He smiled seeing it work. Hey, got it still. When Naruto saw the light blue spot coming from the sphere, he laughed. That old fool still has it. The lightning bolt shot straight at Naruto, who raised his Zanbato and let it hit it. He quickly spun his sword in the air and then stuck it into the ground, letting the lightning spread out inside. Then, all of a sudden, he reached out with his other hand and slammed it right into the stomach of one Ozai, making the man gasp in pain and shock. Before he was thrown into a building as well. He didn't stop fighting. He grabbed his sword, pulled it out of the ground, and put all of his energy into it. Then he yelled, Sauro Shred, Soul Shredder, and swung it at speeds no one else could match. The attack was similar to Ozai's, but it was much fiercer and stronger. With each hit, more smoke filled the building and painful grunts could be heard coming from inside. He decided he'd had enough and stopped in his tracks to wait. When the smoke cleared, Ozai was sitting on a pile of wood, breathing deeply, with many cuts and gashes on his body. His body leaked blood, which turned his clothes red. His hand was resting on his katana, which was stuck in the ground, and his golden eyes were staring into his own. He glared at Ozai and said, "Get up, fool. This is just the beginning. Don't hold back." Ozai just sighed and closed his eyes, only to snap them open and see a fully grown Sharingan with 3 commas spinning quickly and a frown on his face. He stood up with a slight limp, grabbed his katana, and forced all of his chakra through his body again, causing his body to explode into flames. He sighed as he let the flames go through him and enjoyed the way they felt all over his body. That was before he stared with his Sharingan eyes at Naruto's stiff, stoned body. "Now. Finish let's this," he said as he lit his sword again. Naruto, on the other hand, just put more energy into Chaos Eater, making it glow purple and send out yellow streaks of energy. His golden, slit-shaped eyes turned cold and cruel, becoming the eyes of what he is named for. I couldn't agree more. They jumped toward each other again, and when they were only a few inches apart, they both swung their swords down and let out a loud battle cry. Feiya Sutoraiku, Fire Strike. Soul Reap, Sorashimurapu. Boom. The second time they fought, the whole compound began to shake so hard that Akemi, Kushina, and Makoto, who were fighting the last of the Uchiha and beating them, stopped, as did the Uchiha. All they could see was the giant purple sphere that was growing in front of them. It was crackling with yellow energy, and flames were circling it like a ring, with 3 more rings going higher and higher around the sphere. The ground broke and shattered, the buildings in the blast radius were blown away, and the intense energies that were fighting completely burned up any Uchiha who were in the area. Makoto could only say, "Whoa," while Kushina and Akemi just nodded in shock. Even Akemi, who was a Biju, was shocked by the power being shown. She knew that sphere alone could hurt her badly if she was in her beast form. Kushina's thoughts as she watched the sphere of death kill everyone in its path were, "Naru-kun, you'll be fine. You always are. When this is all over, we can all leave this terrible place and live the life we've always wanted, away from all this blood, death, war, and everything else." They were mesmerized as the sphere grew bigger and bigger, even getting bigger than the clouds in the sky, until Akemi saw something that made her eyes go all the way wide. "Shit. Kushina, Makoto, get behind me." When they heard her urgent tone, they did what she told them to do and jumped behind Akemi. It was a good thing they did, too, because Akemi completely changed into her beast form and circled their bodies with her huge tails, ignoring the painful screams of the Uchiha around her because of what she did. She made a wall of her Yukai around herself and the other 2. Why did she do this? Simple, the sphere of death slowly began to crack. White cracks appeared in the middle, and as time went on, the cracks got bigger and happened more often. With just a second to spare, everyone who saw it, including all of the elemental nations. The ball blew up. Boom. And everything went to hell in a cataclysmic explosion that shook Hai no Kuni to its very core. The huge explosion made the sky go completely dark, and the ground shook and trembled. The shockwave went all the way across the country, making every living thing feel the aftershock. No one was killed, but they all felt the same thing, a sudden rush of wind that died down when it reached the borders of every country and hit the ocean. Kushina, Akemi, and Makoto all hoped and prayed that Naruto would be okay through all of this. 10 minutes later. It had been 10 minutes since the explosion, and since then, Kushina and Makoto had been safe under Akemi's care. The fence she put up was broken all the way around, but it still worked. They were buried by a lot of rubble, but with a flick of Akemi's tail, it all flew up into the air and fell away from them. "Ah. My head," Makoto moaned in pain as she rubbed her sore head. Kushina just quickly blinked her eyes to get rid of the sudden white light that had completely filled her vision before. Akemi herself kept quiet the whole time. Why? Well, we're about to find out, because when Kushina heard the silence, she looked at Akemi. When she saw what Akemi was seeing, her jaw dropped, as did Makoto's. Akemi was standing in front of them, pointing with a shaky finger. Her eyes were as big as they could be, humanly or demonically. She could only see black, burned-out buildings in front of her. The buildings had been burned to a crisp or turned to ashes. All of the Uchiha were killed by the sudden explosion because they didn't have the same protection as Kushina and Makoto. Their bodies burned, making it impossible to tell who they were. But what really caught people's attention was the giant crater where the clan head compound used to be. It was so big that it was impossible to imagine. Akemi knew it was bigger than her beast form for sure. Oh. Kami. Makoto said, and Kushina woke up. Before she ran straight to the middle of the crater, her eyes filled with fear. Fear that she would lose the person she loved just as they were about to leave the land of death. The fear of never seeing him again. Naruto-kun. She yelled, and she jumped into the crater as her voice echoed through the area. She looked for Akemi and Makoto quickly, but she never saw them land in the crater or see the worry in their eyes. They all started to look in the huge crater for any sign of Naruto, but as they did, their hopes started to slowly fade and horror started to fill them. It just couldn't be. Naruto died. Right? Please, Kami, don't take him away from me. Please, Kami-sama, I beg you. Kushina's prayers were carried on the still wind. After a while of not hearing anything, she slowly started to cry. She brought her knees to her chest and cried into them. Akemi let a tear fall. She couldn't feel any energy signatures nearby, so she slowly walked up to her old body, hugged her close, and whispered soft words to her. I tried to calm her down, but it didn't work. She was crying too. Makoto showed up next to her and gave her a hug, too, as she yelled at herself for asking Naruto to do this. She didn't want this to happen at all. Naruto-kun, please come back, he said. Please come back to me, I love you so much. We just got here together. Please. Please. Her cries of pain turned into pleading words. Even though they didn't hear her cries, her prayers seemed to be answered by the sound of rocks falling in a sort of grunt. A hand shot out of the ground before it closed, and with a slight twitch. Bang. A body came out of the dirt. It wasn't the same shape as the giant Naruto or Ozai, the head of the clan. But when the golden hair showed, it was a dead giveaway. When the man fully got up from the ground, he bent his neck and rolled it a few times to get all the noises out. He then dusted off his shoulder and clothes, shot his hand back into the dirt, and pulled out Chaos Eater. Only now it's smaller, just like the man. Naruto frowned and shook his head when he looked at himself. Man didn't expect the seal to go off like that during the clash. Those energies must have messed up the seal. Guess I'm like this, huh? When he heard crying, Naruto's ears perked up and he said, oh well. But when he heard the person crying, he stopped. Kushina-chan. He looked around the area quickly until he saw Akemi, Makoto, and Kushina in 3 different forms, holding Kushina while she cried into her knees. He quickly got close to them with his speed because he wanted to help calm Kushina down and see if she was okay. Why? Why? Naru-kun. Why did you die? When he heard what she said, he frowned, and as he moved out from behind them, he let his shadow slowly cover everyone. He squatted down slowly and thought to himself that he was back to his normal height of 6 feet 5. He sighed and looked up at Kushina, Akemi, and Makoto before he spoke. Now, Kushiheim, why would you think I'm dead? He asked, and all 3 of them seemed to stop in their tracks. Slowly but surely, they all turned their heads toward him. Their eyes grew wider, especially Kushina's, which shone from the tears that had fallen from her eyes. Fear and terror are slowly going away, and hope and happiness are taking their place. Reaching out with her shaky voice, Kushina spoke in a whisper. She was so full of hope that if she was told the wrong thing, it would break her spirit completely. "En Naruto-kun? Aye, is it you?" the blonde asked with a warm smile. "Of course it's him. Did you really think that could kill me?" he said, "Seriously now?" But all he got was a red missile that hit him and knocked him down. A pair of wet lips hitting his own. He could tell it was Kushina's lip because her eyes were closed and tears were falling down her face. She had her arms around his neck and held onto his shoulders so tightly that he could tell she didn't want to let go anytime soon. But soon, he gave in to his feelings, and he and Kushina soon shared a hot, passionate kiss that showed how much they loved each other. He put his arms around her and picked her up, then put her legs around his waist. He kept up the pace of their kiss while slowly running his fingers through her red hair. When their tongues hit each other, they tasted each other and then went back to kissing. Kushina started to slightly moan as he kissed her, and he responded by stroking her back. They broke apart reluctantly, but not before Kushina leaned against his muscular chest and sighed happily, her face red from their first real kiss. Her eyes were full of love for the man who had wrapped his arms around her. Soon, though, she fell asleep on his chest and began to lightly snore. When Naruto saw this, he quietly laughed and turned back to the girls. Only to make sure that, in secret, both of them out cold, with nosebleeds and faces as red as cherries. "Hey, and they say men are perverts? Ha ha ha." Seeing the problem, though, he slowly and carefully made 3 smokeless cage bushins. He used 2 of them to pick up Akemi and Makoto, and he used the 3rd without smoke so that he wouldn't wake up his sleeping Heim. When he was done, he looked at his 3 copies and said. He looked at all 3 of them and said, "Okay, you 3, you know where to go. I'll meet you at the village in Nami no Kuni. Put them to bed. They need to rest for what will happen tomorrow." The cage bushins nodded, and then 2 of them jumped away, leaving the one carrying Kushina to look at the person who made it. "How about you, boss?" Before he spoke, all Naruto did was look at him. "I'm going to do what I said I would do, and that's wipe out the Uchiha clan completely." The clone nodded, knowing what was being said. When he saw this, Naruto nodded and walked over to Kushina. When he saw how peacefully she was sleeping, he let out a small sigh and bent down to kiss her on the cheek. "Don't worry, Kushiheim. Your dream and mine will come true, and I'll fight through the 9 circles of hell and back 100 times before I break that promise," he told the clone. "Go," he said. When the clone saw this, he ran away quickly. As soon as he realized it was gone, Naruto tied Chaos Eater to his back and used chakra to make it stay there. He then jumped out of the crater and landed right where the Uchiha clan's main gate used to be.
He was glad to see that the crater was still in the Uchiha area.
"Good, then I can do this all at once," he said. He took a deep breath and put his hands out in front of him before narrowing his eyes. He suddenly grabbed the air, making it look like he was holding onto a wall of plastic. "Now," he said, "let the past and all traces of this rotten clan be gone." So, with a strong push, he pulled both of his arms down, knowing that what he was doing was nothing compared to what he had done before. When he felt the ground shake and tremble before it suddenly moved, he smiled slowly but surely. He just stood there and didn't move as the whole Uchiha district, compound, and forest around it suddenly rose into the air. He gave a cruel smirk when he saw that his work was almost done. The dark history of the Uchiha clan will never be known to the world. He looks at the clan as the piece of land he usually makes has grown to a huge size. It was high in the sky before it slowly started to tilt to the left and fall. He smiled as he watched it happen, then turned around quickly and laughed. Boom. He felt the wind blow past him when the land slab hit the ground. The shockwave may have reached the Fire Country Palace. He just smiled through it all and then pointed with his index finger at the Uchiha main gate. "Almost forgot about you," he said, before pointing his finger down, which caused the gates to move before they, too, were crushed by the earth. Naruto sighed and grinned when he saw that his job was done. "Well, it's time to go," said Naruto, "and finally be free of the chains that tie us to this land." With that, his body vanished, leaving nothing behind. No blood, no dead Uchiha bodies, no torn-up buildings or crater the size of a Kyuubi. Only a normal-looking piece of land that could be the new home of a rich merchant or farmer. If those people only knew what was below. 2 hours later, Nami no Kuni village. When they got to the small town in Mai no Kuni, Naruto found a hotel that he knew was where his clones took the girls. As he walks into the house, he sighs and looks himself over again. From being a giant 25 feet tall to a normal height of 6 feet 5 feet, which is still tall for most people, his body seems to have shrunk in a big way. His huge muscles were now tight and skinny, and his body was more built for speed and power. He looked at his hand with suspicion, then clenched it as his eyes got smaller. Chaos Eater on his back was also shorter, measuring 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide. "I didn't think that would happen. Guess that the seal was broken when it came into contact with those energies," he said in jest. "Guess I'll have to make a new one." Then he found the door with the number 248. Pulling a key out of his baggy pants that were not too worn, he put it in the lock and slowly opened the door by twisting it open. Makoto was sleeping with a small pillow under her head on the couch in the living room. He looked at her suspiciously and then shook his head. She had proven herself back there, so he had no reason to still be afraid of her. Not as much as before, though. He walked slowly past the kitchen and over to Makoto. As he looked down at her, he sighed and pulled the cover off the floor to cover her feet and shoulders. He did this quietly so as not to wake her. After that, he got up and left, so he didn't see Makoto's soft smile and small murmur. If he had heard it, he would have stopped in his tracks. Naruto-kun. As he walks down the hall, he comes to the master bedroom. When he opens the door, he sees something that makes him smile. A very sincere one, because the scene in front of him was something he had been dreaming of seeing for so long. That is, Kushina's Haim was sleeping on a king-size bed with the sheets over her shoulders and around her body. Her pale skin almost looked like it was glowing in the moonlight. Her long, dark hair was all over the bed, giving her a royal look. He looked over and saw that the baby fox was sleeping in her arms, which meant it was Akemi. With a small sigh, he slowly unhooked Chaos Eater from his back and put it against the wall, then took off his shoes and shirt. After that, he slowly moved to the other side of the bed and put the sheets over himself.
He moved slowly toward Kushina and then wrapped his arms around her slowly.
Slowly, he pulled her toward him until she was facing him with her face against his and her body against his. He smiled at her sleeping face, kissed her on the forehead, and then sighed. "Good night, Kushi-Haim. Tomorrow, we all start our new lives, no longer alone but together." She seemed to smile as soon as she heard his words. He put his hand on her cheek and closed his eyes, knowing that he was with the person he loved most and cared about more than anything else in the world. When the bright yellow sun came up in the early morning, it shone through the window and onto the couple in bed together. It was like a light blessing that made them feel even warmer. When the sun's light reached Kushina's face, her eyes twitched and then opened a little bit before closing again because of the light.
After a few low grumbles, she blinked away the light and got her eyesight back to normal.
When she did, Kushina looked down at her fiend Akemi, who was sleeping in her kit form, and saw that she was still her friend. She gave a small smile and sighed. Then she felt another pair of arms wrap around her body, and her eyes grew wide. From the way the hard, muscled arms wrapped around her and the way the 8-pack abs and fully muscled chest felt, she knew exactly whose arms she was in. She had to hold back a gasp as she slowly looked up. Naru. Takun. Her words were full of relief and surprise, since the face of the person she loved had changed a little bit. All of his body parts are now smaller than they used to be. His arms were skinny, but they were strong and packed with a lot of muscle. If she put her body against it, she could see his ripped chest and abs. She smiled at him as she looked up at him and put her hand on his cheek. She leaned in to kiss him, and the man slowly opened his eyes to see her. After a second, he shut his eyes again. Then, he surprised Kushina by leaning into the kiss and pulling her closer to him. That was before she started to moan during the kiss when he started to run his hands down her back and run his fingers through her hair. Naruto-kun. She moaned more and more as he helped her. Soon, he pulled her close to him until their faces were just a few inches apart. Then, after they kissed, he put his hand on top of hers. Kushina let out a loving sigh and then put her head on his chest, while he rubbed one hand over his wrinkly chest. "What a wake-up call," she said. His words made her blush a little, and then she smiled and gave him a sneaky look. "If you're a good boy, you'll get more," he said with a laugh, which made her blush because his chest vibrated in a way that sent a small shock of pleasure through her body. When he looked down at her, he smiled so big that his face almost broke. "Hey, I'm sorry, but being a good boy isn't my strong suit, but I'm great at being a bad boy," he said. When he pinched her butt, she turned a deep, blood-red color. Her face turned even more red before she let out a very cute squeak. When he heard this, he smiled and gave her a kiss on the lips. She kissed him back hard. Her tongue asked him to let it in, which he did, and then she put her tongue in his mouth to taste him. Before they got into a fight over who was in charge, she touched his tongue. He tried out her mouth by tasting, of all things, ramen, which made him laugh. After taking a break to get some air, Kushina let out another sigh. Her red face looked almost divine in the light of the sun. Her violet eyes shone with love and happiness because she was with him and only him. With a smile, he said, "Kushi-hime, you know that as much as I love being in bed with you and would want to stay there all day, we all need to get up. It's time we all left." This got her attention right away. "When we leave, Naruto-kun, where are we going?" The man just smiled. Before he put on his clothes again and strapped Chaos Eater to his back, he changed. After he did that, he turned around and saw Kushina getting out of bed. He had to hold back a nosebleed when he saw her goddess-like body, which was hidden by the bedsheets. Kushina saw this and got a little red in the face before she did something that did make him bleed from the nose. She tried to hide her body by crossing her legs and putting her arm over her breasts while blushing cutely. When she saw him looking at her body, her violet eyes made her look both nervous and ashamed. He quickly wiped away the nosebleed and walked out of the room to hide how red he was getting, while the image of what she had just done was burned into his mind and would never leave. Ever. When she was sure he was gone, her face lit up like a Christmas tree, and she put her hands on her cheeks and let out a small squeal. "Damn Kushi-chan, you are quite the unintentional flirt, aren't you?" The voice teased. It made her look at the bed and see Akemi back in her human form, wearing the same clothes as yesterday. Kushina just mumbled a response, while Akemi just laughed. Naruto would walk out of the hallway and into the living room to wake up Makoto, but when he got there, she was already awake and ready to go. She wore the same clothes as yesterday, but her eyes now showed how much she wanted to leave the cursed land she had lived in. He gave her a nod, and she slowly nodded back and gave him a big smile. He then walked past her and said, "Makoto, tell Kushina-chan and Akemi to meet you and me at the docks. When you're all ready, we'll leave." He kept walking until he reached the door and opened and shut it behind him. Makoto looked down at the ground and smiled after she left. She remembered what he did last night, even if he didn't know about it. In fact, she was shocked by what he did. She thought he hated her, but after he checked on her and made sure she was okay and warm, she couldn't be happier with her decision to come with Kushina. 1 hour later, docks. So, does anyone know what Naruto is up to here at the docks? As a fox, Akemi asked as she propped up Kushina's head. Both women told her no. They had already left the hotel after hearing that Naruto had paid for the night and everything. So, when they left, they all went to the docks to find out what he was doing. Kushina already had an idea, but she wanted to see it for herself to be sure. Oi! Made them all look up, and when they did, they were surprised to see Naruto standing in front of them with Chaos Eater on his back. But what caught their attention most, or Kushina's, was what he was standing on. Oh my Kami! You got a caravel! Her eyes were as wide as they could be, and they were shining with excitement. Akemi just laughed, and Makoto just laughed out loud. Naruto himself laughed and then said, "That's right, I did. But let's hurry, I want to set sail before the sun fully rises." When they heard this, they nodded and jumped on the boat. As soon as their feet hit the hard wood floor, they set out to look around their new ship and remember every inch of it. While Naruto himself took the knot out of the rope and let the sails go. He then sent out a few cage bushins to start running the ship while he went to steer and waited for the girls. As soon as they felt the boat start to move and shake, they ran out onto the deck. He looked down at them and said, "Girls up here." When Kushina heard him, she jumped up next to him and said, "Naruto-kun. I knew we were going to use a boat, but how will we run such a big ship with just the two of us?" He just looked at her and then laughed. He patted her head and ruffled her hair, which made her pout in a cute way. He then pointed at the sails, and she went where he pointed. "Why, cage bunchins, of course," she said, blinking once before slapping her head and sighing. Of course, only Naruto would come up with such a clever way to do something so useful. She spoke as she looked back at Naruto's amused face. "Oh, I see," he said with a smile. Then he put his arm around her shoulder and kissed her cheek. Kushina smiled and leaned against him as she looked up and blushed a little. He smiled as he looked down at her and then turned to look at the vast ocean. He breathed in the smell of the deep sea breeze as it blew his hair. This is only a small part of what he and Kushina wanted. The chains and shackles that tied them to their bloody past were almost all gone, and they were almost on their way to living the life they had always dreamed of. He looked at Akemi and Makoto. "I didn't think I'd be bringing along 2 more women, but oh well, things will get interesting for sure." He was cut off from his thoughts, though, when boom! Uzumaki D. Naruto. Stop right there or face judgment. Was the shout that made him look over his shoulder and see the water exploding on the starboard side of the ship. He saw what might have been a cannonball, which made him very angry. A full armada of navy ships from Iwagakure. The admiral of Iwagakure is on the front side of the ship that is in the lead. "Damn, they're so determined that they even brought out their ships," he said. Naruto said as Makoto and Kushina looked at the ships and couldn't believe how many there were. How does a village of shinobi even have ships? And why is it from Tsuchi no Kuni? As more cannonballs went by their ship, Makoto said, "It looks like they just want to scare us." Naruto himself just jerked every once in a while. I think they had a branch of their village near the ocean and built a docking village for themselves. When they attacked Kirigakure, maybe they used these. As she spoke, Akemi looked at each ship behind them. "I want to know how they knew we were going to be here. Did one of their spies see us?" Kushina said, clenching her hand on the wooden railing and almost glaring at the one thing that was keeping them all from leaving the elemental nations for good. Naruto just walked next to Kushina, his bangs covering his eyes. His fists were so tight that blood came out of both of them. His veins were popping out of his arms, and the way they were shaking showed how close he was to breaking. Kushina saw him and was about to ask him if he was okay. But it was too late when he put his head back and almost roared. "You Kami forsaken bastards. I told you not to mess with me. But no, your stupid, ignorant, and cruel Tsukikage is too stubborn to have my head. Well, guess what? None of you will get out of here alive." His words echoed across the open sea and made the shinobi on the Iwa ships shiver. When they looked at the girls to his right, they could see that his golden eyes had become fiery gold. Kushina, Makoto, hold on, and Akemi, hold the wheel. Things are about to get very damaging. When Akemi heard this, she opened her eyes wide and jumped to the wheel as Kushina and Makoto grabbed the railing. When he saw this, he turned his head back to the armada and put both arms up. You idiots chased me, and you'll pay for it. This will be remembered as the day we left the elemental nations. Everyone will see you die. Tell Shinigami-sama to go to hell for me. He then clenched his fist and knelt down with his arms across his chest. Then, in less than a second, he turned them around. Both of his fists hit the air, making cracks, and without a second to spare, a shockwave erupted from him and went straight into the ocean. The Iwagakure would always remember Naruto's golden, fiery, slitted eyes staring down at their entire fleet of fully stocked ships of Iwagakure shinobi as they floated on the ocean floor. All of them, but they were swallowed and crushed by huge waves that came from both sides, rose up to the sky, and crashed down on them as a huge whirlpool formed under them. Their screams of fear and pain were clear and loud. The area was filled with the sounds of boats being crushed and water moving around. The three women were so shocked and amazed by what they had just seen that they couldn't say a word about what they had just seen, even though the event was still shaking the boat. All of the ships in the armada were completely wiped out. It was funny, really, because they were sailing on the same water. The sea itself, which they had sworn to sail, turned on them and crushed them with its endless pressure. When he saw that they were gone, Naruto let go of his hands and turned around. When he did, he saw three girls staring at him like he was God. He blinked before chuckling. Are you just going to keep staring at me like that? He asked, really amused by the way they were acting. He was also surprised by what his powers could do in water, but he got over it quickly and was back to normal in a few days. Even if a wave of water did swallow a whole mountain by accident. It happened by accident because he was practicing his power on open water. When he got to the wheel, he thanked Akemi with a nod and then let out a sigh. Well, let's start our new life. I hope you girls are ready. He got his answer quickly when Naruto-kun, that was such a cool thing. Kushina yelled before she was even on his back, with her arms around his neck and a smile on her face. Makoto just smiled after seeing what she had just seen. She was sure that choosing to be with Naruto was the best decision she had ever made. It was for sure going to be exciting, especially with him there. In a second, Akemi was next to Naruto, and her eyes were almost as bright as two stars. You have to teach me that, was her reply. Then she changed into her kit form and sat on his head, nuzzling his golden black hair with black streaks. Naruto just sighed and turned the ship away from the elemental nations as he did so. He and Kushina will never look back at the land that has hurt them so much. He would never look back at the land he wanted to break up. Instead, he would start a new life with the people he loves and the people around him. He would soon find out, though, that Kushina wasn't the only girl he loved in this new life.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.